Assalamu alaikum. I'm Ashley Pearson Khan, and I am with Muslimi. I'm sitting down with Sheikh Saad Tasleem, and he's going to be talking to me about a few different things today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good to be here. Alhamdulillah. Glad to be on Muslimi.
Awesome.
I heard you guys are doing great stuff, so it's nice to be here.
We're glad to have you here.
Thank
so
you.
What are we talking about today? Do you want to talk a little bit about fashion? Because I would love to.
Sure, we
to
can
hear
talk
take on
about
that.
fashion. You got questions about fashion?
Yeah.
What do you want to know?
Yeah. Tell me what you're working on, designing, what you've got going on.
Yeah, so I know people who work in my field, da'wah work, lecturing and so on and so forth. You don't necessarily associate fashion with it. Part of my background, and not a lot of people know this, I think of myself as a creative. I have a background, like art and design has always been very important to me. And I always feel like there's a part of like I have a need to express myself creativity, with my creativity and public speaking and stuff. I always felt like I need an outlet. And so initially it just started with, just designing clothes for myself. And then it was an extension of that. So I designed for myself. And I'm like, if other people want to wear what I'm designing, then that's cool.
What inspired you to design for yourself? Was it something lacking? Because it seems like you want to incorporate, your religion with what you're wearing, right? Like being Muslim is part of your identity, right?
Yeah.
Was there a lack of clothing out there that you felt kind of brought those things together? Is that why you did it?
So you inspired me. What I mean by you is my Muslim sisters inspired me, because I looked at Muslim fashion and I had seen that Muslim women, alhamdulillah, had made a lot of strides in terms of Muslim fashion. Muslim women are very creative styles, and staying within the bounds of the Sharia with what Allah has made halal. It's so cool. And I'm like, where's this stuff for guys? And there really isn't. There's the very traditional thobe and shalwar qamees, and they'll add a little couple things here, a couple things there, but like it's pretty much all the same. And my background being creative and so on and so forth, I wanted to design stuff for myself that express my identity. And my identity, I think all of our identities are complex, but I think of my identity as complex as well. I'm originally, both my parents are Pakistani, born, raised in the States. I lived in Saudi. And so you take all those cultures and you put them together. And then my rebellious side, my history with like punk rock and stuff like that. And I was like, do my clothes express that? And I didn't find what's out there really expressing that. So I'm like, what, I'll make my own clothes and hopefully inspire the next generation as well, or even this generation. And I have found it challenging because guys are kind of not, I don't know if they're not ready to kind of like break out of their shells and be like, I want to wear something different, something that I'm okay with wearing, something that most people aren't wearing, right? Because that's something I do it like on the daily, right? But the idea is to kind of inspire young Muslim men as well to explore that and like push Muslim men's fashion forward.
MashaAllah, that's amazing. Yeah, you do see a lot of women come out with hijab lines and things like that.
Yeah.
And currently it's just men's fashion, right? Do you plan on expanding eventually?
Yeah, inshallah one day. We'll see how it goes. Right now, I don't think there's a need when it comes to Muslim women's fashion because there's a lot going on. If I feel like I have something to add to it, I will one day. But right now, I think for the men, I think they need that push, right? Maybe one day we'll see. Why not? If I have something to say, and so my designs come from me and my need to express myself. So if I come to a point in life where I'm like, you know what, I want to contribute there as well. Sure, why not? But at the moment, it's trying to get the guys to express themselves.
MashaAllah, that's really awesome. Is there anything else that you want people to know about your line or you personally?
Yeah, so just something very interesting that I found with my clothing line. I was actually talking to some business people came up to me and they're like, how's your clothing line doing or whatever. I'm like, it's okay. We kind of have some people that are so we have two types of people who are totally down. They're like, wow, this is stuff that we haven't seen before. It's out there. It's Islamic. It's it's halal. It fits within the guidelines of the Sharia, but it's also very out there, right? And there's people who get it, and then there's people who are like, what is this, right? This doesn't look like a traditional thobe or shalwar qamees, or like, what are you trying to do? Like, what's going on? The first category of people are very few, right? People that see that and they're daring to put something like that on or whatever. So, I was speaking to a person who's talking about business, and I said, I almost feel like I have to create a market and then try to sell to them.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you guys, you can do this, you can express yourself, and you can look, different, and so on and so forth. And then I gotta be like, oh, here's some clothes for you.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge I'm facing right now. But it's okay. I think my hope is that it will kind of pave the way. So if nothing else comes from this other than people are inspired and the next generation is inspired, that'll make me happy. And as long as I'm able to make clothes for myself.
Yeah.
I hate looking boring. I know that sounds weird, and this is one of the reasons I actually started making clothes for myself, because when you're at a convention or something and like you go buy a shirt from, I don't know, wherever, H&M or whatever, fast fashion, if you buy a shirt and there's like 1,000 people at the convention, at least 20 dudes are wearing the same shirt. Right. So for me, I'm like, no, I can't have that. So I'm just gonna make my own shirt. So I'm, that's what I hope for, inshallah, with the fashion industry in general. And I have seen a little bit of change. I think men are looking for that. It's slow, but I think, inshallah, there's hope. Inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah, yeah. So is there a connection between maybe people of the past and fashion now that maybe kind of inspire you or that you can think of?
That's a good question, because I do get that a lot. People are like, where does fashion fit in with like traditional knowledge and so on and so forth? Because when you think of, let's just be real, when you think of a sheikh or an imam and so on and so forth, they look a very specific look. And I'm sorry, I don't fit that mold, right? So people say like, well, how did that happen? What's the connection there? Interestingly enough, when we think about the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, we tend to we have this image in our mind of they all looked exactly the same. Their hair was the same and they had the same beards and so on and so forth.
I'm guilty of that.
And that's normal. It's normal to feel that way, but that is actually not the case. They had different hairstyles. Even the way they did their beards, and they wore jewelry. Like we know for a fact they wore rings and so on and so forth. And there was style and fashion at that time as well. It's just hard for us to wrap our brains around that, or we tend to think of them, they all look the same, everything was the same, and that's not the case. Just like they had different personalities, they had different backgrounds, and even different cultures and so on and so forth. Likewise, that was reflected in the way they looked as well. And so for me, I don't think I'm doing anything new, honestly. Even some of our scholars of the past are known to dress well, to dress nice. Imam Malik, for example, one of the things that is known about Imam Malik, Allah yarhamuhu, is that he took pride in the clothes that he wore. Some stories mention about Imam Malik then when he would narrate a new hadith that people hadn't heard before, he would put on a new outfit, right? Out of respect to the knowledge, like this is a very important day, right? I'm going to convey this hadith, and he would put on new clothes, right? So that relationship between dressing nice and looking nice, and that is from our submission to Allah, because in the end of the day, we look nice and dress nice for the sake of Allah, and we owe that to Allah. We attribute that to Allah and not to ourselves. The modern world view is it's all about me, right? So if I look nice, it's because I'm nice, right? Or I have the nice clothes, I have the nice stuff, and so on and so forth. The Islamic framework is, if I look nice, that's a reflection on God, not on me, right? It is Allah who has given this to me. It's not because of my, anything that I did or anything that I. And so this is why Allah says, فَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. As for the blessings of your Lord, then speak of them. Allah says, نِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ, the blessings of your Lord, right? So whatever good you have, it came from Allah. So praise Allah through the things that you have. And that also saves us from things like pride and arrogance, right? Where we think like, oh, it's all about me. Exactly. Right? No, it's about Allah, and we give thanks and gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us to have these things, and obviously using what Allah has given us for good as well.
Inshallah, that was really good, yeah. I wanted to go back to what you said before, and there were a couple of things that you said that kind of have led me to this question. Especially in Western society, men are kind of they have to almost like suppress how they feel, and they're supposed to be a certain way, very masculine, very tough. You don't cry, things like that. And so I feel like sometimes the outward expression doesn't always come through like their clothes. Yeah. Do you think that's why some people are maybe a little more afraid to wear something that is like out there?
Look, I would say that is like you find that amongst Muslims as well, but I think a lot of that comes from culture and not from Islam itself.
Right.
Because you find certain qualities amongst the Prophet ﷺ and the companions that if you were to put it into like modern, context, you could easily say, oh, that's masculine, or you know what, that's feminine. Like it's feminine to cry, to shed a tear, or to express your feelings and so on and so forth. And that's not the case, right? So the idea of masculinity and femininity, once again, through the Islamic framework, I think people understood it, they would understand it's a perfect balance, right? That there's certain, yes, and there's a distinction. I want to be very clear. There's a distinction between what is considered masculine and feminine. On the other hand, there are many, many things that are common between men and women. And that's something actually the Sharia, if you look at the laws and the rules of the Sharia, it very much recognizes that. The vast majority of rulings in the Sharia apply to both men and women in the same way. That tells us what? In most ways, men and women are very similar, or they're the same. But there are some differences, right, in the rules and the laws. And there's certain rulings that are specific to men, certain rulings that are specific to women, and that tells us that there are differences between men and women. And the point of those differences, or for us as Muslims, we use those differences not to put each other down, but to empower each other. Right, that I want to, I'm a source of strength for you, and you're a source of strength for me, and that is reflected in our behavior and our attitude as well. So this idea of and so, like I said, culture I think is to blame. It's not Islam, or I should say, culture or a misunderstanding of Islam. That certain things are like, if a man expresses himself, even the idea of jewelry, right? You can take that to an extreme, right? Where there's a type of jewelry that can become feminine, but on the other hand, is all jewelry by nature feminine? And in actuality, a lot of these issues, if we're talking about clothing and dress, Islam actually leaves this up to culture, because in certain cultures they will look at the way a person dresses, and they will look at that as feminine or masculine. I'm not talking about behavior here. I'm not talking about attitudes. I'm not talking about expressing your feelings. I'm talking simply as dress. One of the examples that I give I teach a class on this. So, I ask my students, I'm like, is it feminine to wear a skirt? Right? And most guys will be like, yeah, like men don't wear skirts. Then I'm like, okay, go to Scotland and tell men who wear the kilt, don't call it a skirt, because then you're going to be in a lot of problems there. But let's be real. It's pretty much just a skirt, right? Yeah. I didn't say that. But yeah, go tell them that this is feminine, and they'll be like, what are you talking about? Right. This is actually, it's the most masculine thing you can do, right? They're like, look, it's to show like your hairy legs and that you're a man and so on and so forth. So that's masculine. So culture does have an effect on that, right? And for sure. And the beautiful thing about Islam is that Islam takes that into account. Islam isn't like, put all this aside, and because Islam is not meant for one culture, one place, one time. It's meant for all times, all places, all cultures. Right? So yes, there is a guideline in Islam that men should not imitate women and women should not imitate men, but in certain things, that definition of masculinity and femininity, it is affected by culture, and Islam takes that into account.
So thank you for joining me today. Where can people learn about your clothing line and maybe follow you on social media? Sure.
I've made it very simple for people, saadtasleem.com. If you go there, it takes you to my clothing line, and I'm Saad Tasleem on all my socials. Look me up, I'm there, all the information's there, so check it out.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ashley Person Khan from Muslimi. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and check out all of our social media and our website.